On September 26, 1983, the world teetered on the brink of annihilation, closer to nuclear Armageddon than almost anyone realized. There were no blaring sirens in our cities, no urgent news flashes interrupting our favorite shows. The public slept soundly, unaware that deep inside a secret Soviet military bunker, one man's decision was all that stood between civilization and total destruction. This is the incredible, untold story of Stanislav Petrov, the man who single-handedly saved the world, and whose name remains a mystery to most. To understand the weight of that night, we have to go back to 1983. The Cold War wasn't just cold. It was frozen solid with suspicion and paranoia. The relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union was at its lowest point in decades. It was a terrifying standoff. Both superpowers had thousands of nuclear warheads aimed at each other, ready to launch at a moment's notice. The entire system was built on a knife's edge, where one misunderstanding, one technical glitch, could trigger an irreversible chain reaction, ending human history as we know it. The world held its breath, and in that tense silence, any spark could have ignited the final fire. This is where Stanislav Petrov enters our story. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, stationed at Serpukhov 15, a top-secret command center just outside Moscow. His job was deceptively simple, yet unimaginably stressful. He was the duty officer responsible for monitoring the Soviet Union's brand-new early warning satellite system. Codenamed OKO, this system was designed for one purpose: to detect the launch of American nuclear missiles. If the system signaled an attack, Petrov's duty was clear and absolute. He was to immediately report the launch up the chain of command, which would then give Soviet leaders mere minutes to decide whether to launch a full-scale retaliatory strike. In this high-stakes game of nuclear chess, there was no room for error. The fate of hundreds of millions of people rested on the reliability of his screens and his judgment. Just past midnight, the sterile calm of the command center was shattered. A piercing siren blared through the bunker. Red lights flashed, casting an ominous glow on the faces of the soldiers. On Petrov's screen, a single terrifying word appeared in bold red letters: launch. The system was reporting that the United States had just launched an intercontinental ballistic missile. The path was clear. It was headed straight for the Soviet Union. As Petrov and his team stared in disbelief, the nightmare escalated. A second missile launch was detected, then a third, a fourth, and finally a fifth. 5 nuclear missiles were supposedly streaking across the sky, closing in. The computers, the satellites, everything was screaming that the unthinkable was happening. The final war had begun. The protocol for this exact scenario was drilled into every soldier in that bunker. It was unambiguous. Petrov's duty was to pick up the direct line to his superiors and report the attack. His report would be taken as verified fact. Once that call was made, the Soviet leadership would have almost no time to deliberate. The logic of mutually assured destruction demanded an immediate, massive response. Launching their own arsenal of nuclear missiles at the United States and its allies was the only prescribed option. The clock was ticking down to doomsday, and the final decision rested on Petrov's shoulders. The world was holding its breath, and it didn't even know it. But in that moment of supreme crisis, as panic and procedure screamed at him to act, a nagging doubt crept into Petrov's mind. Something felt wrong. He was a trained analyst, a man of logic, and the logic of the situation didn't add up. He reasoned that if the United States were truly initiating a first strike, they wouldn't launch just 5 missiles. It was illogical. A real attack, a decapitation strike designed to win a nuclear war, would be an all-out assault involving hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles to overwhelm Soviet defenses entirely. 5 missiles seemed more like a mistake than an act of war. Furthermore, he knew the satellite system was new, buggy, and had not been fully tested. He had to weigh the computer's alarm against his own human intuition. With the fate of the world hanging in the balance, surrounded by flashing lights and screaming sirens, Stanislav Petrov made a decision that defied his training, his orders, and every instinct for self-preservation. He had 2 buttons on his console, one to report the launch and one to dismiss it as a false alarm. The system was telling him to report it. His subordinates were urging him to follow protocol. But guided by nothing more than his gut feeling and a sliver of logic, he made his choice. He picked up the phone to his superiors and reported that the system was malfunctioning. He declared it a false alarm. He was betting the life of every person on Earth on his own intuition. Imagine the tension in that room. After making that call, all Petrov could do was wait. Every second that ticked by must have felt like a lifetime. If he was wrong, Soviet radar installations would soon pick up the incoming warheads, and it would be too late. The first explosions would incinerate millions, and he would be remembered as the man whose hesitation doomed his country. The air was thick with suffocating fear. But as minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity, nothing happened. There were no further alerts, no ground radar confirmations, no mushroom clouds blooming over Soviet cities. Just silence. The world outside the bunker continued to spin, blissfully unaware. Eventually, it became clear Stanislav Petrov had been right. It was later determined that the satellites had mistaken the reflection of sunlight off high-altitude clouds for missile engine plumes. A freak cosmic coincidence had nearly ended the world. Because of Stanislav Petrov's courageous act of disobedience, the sun rose on September 27, 1983, but here is the most astonishing and tragic part of the story. He wasn't hailed as a hero. He wasn't given a medal. Instead, he was officially reprimanded. Why? For failing to correctly document the events in the logbook during the crisis. His superiors, embarrassed by the catastrophic failure of their multi-billion ruble warning system, buried the incident. His story was classified and he became an inconvenient secret. He was reassigned to a less sensitive post and soon retired from the military, his health failing from the immense stress. For years, he lived in quiet obscurity in a small apartment, carrying the silent weight of the night he saved the world, alone. It wasn't until decades later, after the fall of the Soviet Union, that his story finally came to light. A former superior officer published his memoirs, and the world learned of Petrov's incredible act of courage. He began to receive international recognition, awards, and the title he so rightfully deserved, the man who saved the world. Yet through it all, Petrov remained incredibly humble. He never saw himself as a hero. In interviews, he would often say, "I was simply at the right place at the right time. That's all. I was just doing my job." But his job that night wasn't to follow orders, it was to think. His heroism wasn't in acting, but in his profound courage to act. The story of Stanislav Petrov is a powerful reminder that history isn't always shaped by famous leaders, grand speeches, or powerful armies. Sometimes the most pivotal moments are guided by the quiet conscience of a single individual, who in a moment of extreme pressure chooses reason over fear and calm over panic. He showed the world that true strength sometimes means questioning the system and trusting our own humanity, even when a machine is screaming at us to do otherwise. His legacy is the world we live in today, a world that was given a second chance. Stanislav Petrov passed away in 2017, almost as quietly as he had lived. If you believe that unsung heroes like him deserve to be remembered, that their stories are vital for us to learn from, please share this video. Because the world we all share, the lives we all live, exists today, partly because one man in a dark room chose not to press a button. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more untold stories from history, the ones that truly changed our world.